Okay, so this is going to be very interesting. I'm Larry Stein, Stein on Stuttering, and we've got with us Mark Grossman from Long Island, New York, and he's got a very interesting stuttering story, and I think this may inspire some of you. So, Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for inviting me on.
So, you had a lot of speech therapies, and then you went to a psychotherapist, and he had an idea for you. What was that you did that really helped you? About age 25.
Right.
What was it?
It was actually hypnosis. And I really never thought about hypnosis as a way to help to control my stuttering. But he had suggested it. And he would put me under and make some suggestions. He would talk about situations where I might be particularly apt to stutter, maybe on the telephone, or asking a girl out on a date, or things like that. And all I know is that at the end of the session, that my stuttering would improve incrementally, and we would do it. We'd meet weekly, and he would do it. And he said, I'm just going to make a recording, and you can self-hypnotize. And sure enough, that I would say, of all the different modalities that I tried in terms of speech therapy, that helped the most, and it really significantly improved my fluency.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, yeah.
Would you say before that you were you had a severe stutter or a modest stutter, and then how about?
I'd say it was a modest stuttering. It wasn't severe,
okay,
but it was something which was certainly noticeable, and that occasionally friends and family would comment on, and people who were closer with me would comment on, and so it was noticeable. But I would say that since then, and now into my midlife and later life, many people don't even recognize that I stutter, because I'm able to control it to a large degree.
So you control it. How do you control it?
I guess a few ways, and I guess if you talk to stutterers, they might use sort of different coping mechanisms. For me, sometimes it's just slowing down my speech is helpful. Also, I do a good amount of word substitution. So thinking ahead in terms of what I'm going to be saying, thinking about words that I might block on, and coming up with a synonym that I can substitute for it. So it's sort of a constantly thinking ahead of what I'm going to say, and sort of coming up with some mechanism to say it fluently.
Right.
Yeah.
So you certainly aren't done with stuttering, but you've improved your speech.
Right.
But what I love is you do some interesting things. You have your own PR business.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you do some things that not many people who stutter do. Well, you teach, but you don't teach science. You don't teach physics. What do you teach, Mark?
I teach communications. I teach human communications, interpersonal communications, and public speaking. I've actually learned, they say when you teach, you also learn as much as you teach. And I think it's really been the case for me. I've been teaching communications for the last 12 years. And I've found it to be helpful. And I also think that it's helpful to the students. I disclosed to them early on in the semester that I stutter, and that it's something which I battled. And even in the non-public speaking classes and the interpersonal communications, there's still a public speaking component to it. So I let them know that I kind of get it, that in terms of their anxiety about giving their end of semester speech. I've been there when I was their age. It frightened me too. It would frighten me now to have to do it.
Oh, really?
If I had to give like in front of a class, a formal speech like that.
But you
I would still have some anxiety. I mean, the other thing which I do too, and we talked a little bit about it before we hit the record button here, but is stand-up comedy. And I've been doing stand-up comedy for the past five years. And before I go on stage is extremely frightening for me. Once I get on stage and tell a joke or two, and the audience is with me, and they're laughing, and I'm feeling then confident, then the anxiety level comes down, and I'm usually quite fluent at that point. And but you know, before they announce my name to come up on stage, it's, you know, I'm just one big knot. You know?
What made you want to do stand-up comedy?
I've always admired comedians, and I always thought, you know, that you got to really be smart to be a comedian. And I thought, you know, how do you almost like it's if you could make people laugh, that must be just an amazing feeling to do. And it was through a friend of a friend turned me on to this school called Stand Up University, which is given at a local comedy club here on Long Island. And on a lark, I did it. It was given on Tuesday nights for a couple of hours for 7 weeks. And I said, let me just give it a try. And I loved it. It was just a phenomenal experience. So much so that I took the class 2 more times as a way to develop new material and to hone my presentation skills. And I developed a routine, and I got sort of a set of some jokes and stories. And I started taking it on the road to some open mic nights. And that led some comedy producers who are locally based on Long Island here to call me up and to invite me to do legitimate shows that I got paid for.
Great.
And I mean, you don't make much as a comic and at these clubs. It's just pocket change, but it's just the experience of doing it is just great. And,
what do you mean? Jerry Seinfeld makes a lot of money, I thought.
Well, yeah, if you're I'm just a lowly warm-up act for local headliners that nobody's ever heard of, except if you're local here on the island, you know. So but it's a lot of fun. And I even work in my stuttering into one of my early jokes in my set, where I say to the audience that people who have known me over the years are probably amazed that I'm up here doing stand-up comedy, because when I was a kid, I was a stutterer, and I said I was a pretty significant stutterer, and I went for all kinds of speech therapy. Finally found something that worked, hypnosis. I said, yeah, hypnosis worked. The problem is now I smoke. And, and that usually gets a good laugh. And it sort of puts the audience on notice that I stutter. And usually I don't stutter after that, because the audience is kind of with me, and you're sort of, to an extent, acting. I think it's that same mechanism in our brains that when you sing, you don't stutter. And I think it's that same thing when you're acting or when you're on stage giving a performance like comedy, you don't stutter as much. So
have you found that the public speaking and the stand-up comedy, have you found that has helped you in your speech at all?
I think it does. You know, it gives you a level of confidence that you know that you can be fluent, and that I think, yeah, it kind of gives you that level of confidence that you could speak fluently, and that it's going to be okay. And so I found that it is helpful. Yes.
Good, good. So, I mean, just to think about all the things that you do that I've never met anyone who stutters do them. So one last question,
Mhm.
I found for myself, in fact, my way in to improving my speech started with doing some public speaking. That
Mhm.
was how I kind of got the idea that maybe I could not be, so labored with my speech. Don't you think that public speaking is a good kind of entryway for people who want to improve their speech?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's I mean it may initially to a stutterer be something that feels really outside of your comfort zone. Um,
You have
but
to
I
work
think
into it.
but I think that once you do it and you realize that you can do it, that you can push through it, that you can improve your speech and be confident, um, that it can be a very helpful sort of exercise to kind of reach a greater level of fluency.
Yeah, good, good. Yeah, so I just love that you're doing all these things. You have your own business, which is terrific.
Mhm.
You teach, you're lecturing, you're teaching,
Mhm.
you're doing the stand-up comedy. I mean, that's just terrific. I'd love talking with you, and I hope a lot of people see, sure we stutter, but we can still do what we want. I mean, you're
Mhm.
certainly getting quite a few of your dreams in, it seems, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I try not to let it stop me, and I try to also to sort of talk to people about it,
Good.
and if I come across other people who stutter, or um, if I wind up having a difficult day, um, I'll say to people, look, I'm a stutterer, so just sort of excuse me here, but I'm just having a tough day, and I find that opening up about it is very helpful too than trying to mask it in some way.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Well, good. Hey, Gary, it's been great meeting you. I really enjoyed this. I hope people get a lot out of it, that they can see that, yeah, you can stutter, but you can still do all
Mhm.
these great things that you want to do. So I really enjoyed it. And I hope we talk
Thank you.
again, Gary.
Thanks.
All right, talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, you too.